So I got a VFR here that I'm customizing from a wrecked bike, and today I'm trying to get this front end sorted out. Trying to make this little guy up here. All right, so I've spent the morning crafting up this beautiful piece of origami. This represents my little sort of dash on the bike. We'll have the speedometer. We'll be back here. And then this will be the front of it. And I tried to do a couple different triangled areas here to create this angle. And then we've got a little riser on the bottom here to bring the whole thing up. I think this is about as fancy as I can get at the moment with my skill level. From here, I take this apart, cut out all the little pieces, the little triangles and whatnot that make this up. And then we can transfer that into actual metal and then try and weld that together and make a metal version of this. Alright, so here's my bend so far. It actually works out pretty well in terms of this being, when I set it down, this is flat with the bottom of that thing, which is the sort of the design I'm going for, but this part is too wide. So I still need to bend this here some more to bring that in, which means I also need to bend these in a little bit more too. So in order to do that, I've removed one of my little brake plates, whatever, I'm not sure what the right term is, but a little bendy plate in here, and remove that so that I can get this thing in here again, and it can bend, this part can bend and go through there. So yeah, you can see when this sits down on a flat surface that these sit level with the surface, which is what we were looking for. Now I've got these triangles. All right, so we've got our piece here pretty much ready for welding. I just need to I'm gonna clean it up with some acetone, get all the grease and stuff off it, and then I'm gonna Scotch Brite it to get the oxidized layer off the edges and stuff here where I'm gonna be welding. And because it is thin aluminum, that oxidized layer on the outside, that stuff actually takes more heat to melt. Then it melts at a higher temperature than the actual aluminum does. And so with thinner aluminum, by the time you've melted that oxidized layer, you're going to be in trouble already. I want to give myself every advantage I can to be successful on this thin material. All right, so I've got it welded up here, the top part of it. I've still got another portion I want to put underneath this to sort of raise it up about an inch or so, this strip, and I put this strip like all the way around on the bottom here, and then I'll give it a little bit more depth, like literally and sort of visually. So we did okay welding this up. It's nothing crazy, but I'm also planning on sanding it all down so you don't see the weld. All right, so here it is on top of my little riser that we made. Now I got to weld that riser on. All right, here it is. My little muffin top, whatever the heck this thing is. I went ahead and welded up all the seams, and I've already ground them all down using a flap disc to make this thing look like it's one piece. So I do love aluminum. I kind of do love sheet metal in a sense, like, because once you have it together like this, man, this thing feels strong now. But this is how it will go up here, sort of on the front of the bike. Looks kind of ridiculous in my hand like this, but hopefully it will look pretty cool when it's done. All right, so currently my thought is on the bottom of this thing. In order to make the bottom, I wanted to use some thicker aluminum. I have this. This is like 1/4 inch, I believe, which is thicker, heavier than what I kind of want it to be. But what I want to do is to be able to machine out a groove, a sort of recess along the side of this, so that this, when it's finished, can sit down into that groove and that'll give it rigidity on the bottom. And then I'll also be able to bolt the top portion down to the bottom portion, so there'll be two separate pieces that way. All right, so there's this piece rough cut out. Now we got to get it to the mill. All right, I've got my plate cut out and I've got it set up on my mill the best I can get it. I've got it spaced off the table here because my mill doesn't come all the way down to the table. It comes about 4 inches or so off the table. And so I've got it spaced up here, clamped on here. This thing is tied down to the table. This is clamped onto a little spacer. Trying to do this as best I can. This is the best I could come up with. I've got my line here. I've got this all lined up on the edge so that I can move this plate that way, and it should cut a nice little groove down through there. All right, I've made a bottom and the top. And I've got the bottom grooved in the mill. I went ahead and tried to make this as clean and neat as possible, so this thing will fit down in that groove and sort of act as a stabilizer. That groove acts as a stabilizer for the top, which keeps this thing sort of locked in a little bit better. I now need to make a couple little riser things in here that I can tap, and then I can stick this guy on here and then just bolt it down on the sides here. And then we will, of course, clean up the edges and stuff here. So I'll basically just cut that stuff flat around, all the way around, so it looks like this thing is just extended a little bit. All right, so I'm trying to finish off my little top that I just made, and it's got some leveling issues on the bottom. There's a little gap right there. I need to bring everything down so it's at the same height as this right here. I've got this little piece of angle iron. I cut out a chunk of that. I ground down the end of it so it's nice and pointy there. I can use that as a scribe. And I'm doing that because the thickness of this is just about the thickness I need for that gap there, to represent that gap. And I can use this as a scribe and scribe a little mark, a scratch mark on the side of this thing, all at the same level going around. I'm using this. This is a flat surface here as I scribe this whole thing. And then I end up, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little scribe mark going along the side here, and I'm going to grind everything down to that scribe mark. All right, now I have made these two little pieces of aluminum. They're 1/4 inch thick. They go on either side here. I'm going to weld those in, and the thought is that I will put this guy over the top like this, drill through those things, and we'll tap it on either side, and then that will be how we hold this top on. We'll have little screws that just go. All right, I've gone ahead and marked out a circle that I now need to figure out a way to cut that out. All right, I'm going to try out the hole saw. This may not work out. All right, so that actually turned out fairly good. It's one of my better hole saw experiences. All right, so now I've got a hole in here that I can run electronics through. I've made a rookie mistake here. This hole lines up like right where one of the bolts for my headlight is going to sit. So the headlight's not going to bolt into this exactly, but it's going to be underneath it. So I need to actually move this over to here. And so I got to fill this thing in, weld this back in there. So hopefully I won't warp this whole plate and ruin the whole thing. And voila, the hole is gone. I have this thing cranked down here, all sort of fixtured down to the table, clamped down so that hopefully we won't warp it. I've been letting it cool that way. Just gotta put some amps into this 1/4 inch stuff to make it, to weld it up. But yeah, there it is. Hole is now gone. Put that plug back in there. Now I've got to move it to where I figured I needed it to be, which I think is over here, but I'm going to double check. All right, so this is kind of an approximation, but we want our lights to sort of sit about like that or so on here. So you can see like we had that hole right in the center, and it lines up right with this guy here. And so that would be a no-no. It would be blocking, this would be blocking our wires in there. But this guy, because it's so much shorter, it's not as deep as the other one, gives us some space behind it right in here. So I need to move that over. So I need to move that hole over and back into here. All right, I'm spending the morning here, Sunday morning, listening to some jazz on the radio and making some threaded bungs. So I got 4 of these guys. And the idea with them is that they're going to go on the bottom of our little aluminum headlight or electric box thing that goes in the front of the bike. So I'm going to put them in these corners here, like so, approximately. Yeah, and that's how we're going to begin to mount this plate to the actual bike. I'm going to drill through this thing, screw from the inside of the box. We can screw onto these little bungs, and then from these bungs, we'll attach them to the actual frame of the bike. And also onto these, I'm going to be mounting the lights. We've got our little holes drilled here. I got another hole drilled again here for the wires to pass through. And now I'm going to go ahead and try and... I've got my little threaded bungs here. I've got a bunch of 6mm screws, bolts, whatever you want to call them. They came off of an engine I salvaged off of an old Fiat engine. So now we should be able to bolt these on here. All right, so now I've got my bungs on here. This is my threaded, or this is my basis for the rest of this thing. Yeah, it should work out pretty well. We got lots of space here now behind this light. So, all right, my next step. All right, so I've cut out some pieces of 1-inch flat bar here. They're just sort of sitting there. 1/8 inch thick. This is what I have. This is sort of a standard piece of metal that I have around almost all the time because I use it for all kinds of stuff. And so I'm going to span these two together with this. It's going to serve multi-purposes. I'm going to have a hole over here that we're going to actually bolt part of the frame for the bike. Well, not the frame, but the frame for the fairing for the bike. It's going to bolt in here. And I'm also going to put a little bit of flare on this and put like a little curved piece on the bottom here that opens this up a little bit. All right, I've got a hole drilled on the end here. Now I need a little circle here, and this is just the right thing to trace around. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of mark this out. I'm going to try and standardize this. So I'm going to mark this the ends here at a specific length. Then I go ahead, I know I've got 2 dots on there, and if I line this up between those 2 dots, what does that end up looking like? Yeah, and then we end up with this little mark like that, and I just need to cut that out. There they are on the actual piece. You can see it adds that, putting that little curve in there adds just a little bit of character that makes it a little bit more appealing. All right, I've welded these guys up. Now let's see if they still fit on here. All right. Alright, everything works. Lines up where it's supposed to. It's looking good. Looking good so far. Yeah. Now my next step is to start mounting these. I took the lights off of them. Alright, I've got a tentative outline working here. I've got it tacked over here. I've got this one tacked over here. And that's it. They've got one attachment point each. I was going to connect the two of them together right there. I need to test fit stuff to make sure we're still on the right track. See if this thing will still fit in there. Yes, yes, yes. This one should be straight, both this way and that way. This one is just sort of tacked on. I still need to get this thing straightened out. So the way I'm doing that, I've got this front line here, I know is straight. That's a straight line that we're going to use. The rest of it needs to be refined still. So I'm going to use this front. And at least visually, yeah, up top, it needs to lean back. Still needs to lean back some more. All right, I think that might be straight. It might be. Like, just visually check this thing out. Some different angles. Make sure it looks straight. Oops, this way. Alright, I'm gonna tilt this guy. Up that way. Should be able to check it. Should be able to check it with this. Alright, there it is. It's fully welded up at this point, and it's stronger than you might have guessed. Just having like one connection there and one connection there, and then just having the actual frame itself, like that's very strong. That one little light brace there, and then this guy, same deal. I've just got one connection down there and that same connection there, and that's it. And these things are very strong. I'm not sure if I can touch it. It's pretty flipping hot at the moment. But yeah, and it is strong because, this is like 1/4 inch material I'm using on this guy, and then to tie that into this over here, also 1/4 inch, and that's 1/8 inch I'm tying it into, and then we got like 3/16 inch is this whole section here, that frame, and what ties it in over here. And that's not nothing. That is not flimsy material in and of itself, and so that's enough. It should be enough. We'll see with vibrations and stuff on the bike, but the V4 is pretty smooth. All right, so here it is thus far. Sort of on here. It's upside down. This would be how it would look. I'll go ahead and put the lights in here. We'll get a better look at it. Voila. So yeah, something like that, and then this guy will go on the top. I still need to trim off these edges and things like that, clean it up a bit more, but this is the general idea of how this would be. I need to figure out how to mount this contraption that we've now got onto the bike. All right, so I think I have an idea here. This is the stock mount that goes on the front of the steering tube on the bike, and originally held the speedometer and everything on the front. I've already chopped it back. I'm going to chop it back further. I'm going to use this part back here, and then from here we're going to craft out some pieces. All right, so my next step, I've got this thing sort of cut out roughly, and my next step is to figure out a way to mount this thing so I can sort of fixture everything up where this is next to that, and I can tighten it down to specific specs and stuff. And so therefore we've got out our little fixturing guys here. I don't know what you call them, arms, whatever. So yeah, should, in theory, be able to clamp this or something to this guy. Maybe like so. All right, so here's my general fixturing setup. I've got this thing aligned over here off of some of the bolts in the table. I've got this thing bolted down to the table and all aligned that way. I've got this spaced out right in the center here of this plate. And from here, I'm gonna use some 1/4 inch rod to attach this thing, these two pieces together. All right, I've got a couple tacks on here. I've got two pieces connected there. It should be enough that I can test fit it on the bike. This needs to come down because it's pointed up at the moment. Yeah, that needs to come tilted down that way. So hopefully we can do that by hand and not break those tacks off. How much I have left there in terms of tack holding power. Probably gonna take that off and re-tack it, and then we'll bend it some more. And this has been a shaky project putting this together, in the sense that I don't really have a really detailed vision, you know, all the details of how it goes together. And so my solution has been to sort of piece it together in little tiny stages, where I make one piece and I make a piece that attaches to that piece and a piece that attaches to that piece, until I finally have a full piece that I then need to attach to the bike. And the step in between each of those is a little problem that I have to solve, and I solve it one problem at a time until finally we've got something. Okay, this is the real test. What? Does it look cool? I don't know, man. All right, well, I'm gonna keep moving forward here. I like the level which it's at in relation to like the gas tank. I think it's at a good level. That was really the main question in fitting this up. But now, of course, we have a bigger question, that is, does it even look good up there? Kind of wish it wasn't as so pointy on the top. It's kind of nitpicky, and I'm not sure I could have done a whole lot better on that in terms of designing that, or in terms of fabricating that top. I'm thrilled that we've got something connected up there, because now I can start running the electronics up there, and that's a big step, because that's something that's been on pause for too long. All right, so at this point I've got 3 little support bars here that are connecting the actual bike from the old mount on the bike to our new headlight mount, etc. up front here, our new dash basically. And I am closing up the gaps on this thing, welded in a piece of sheet metal right there. Same thing on the other side, because originally this had like these two tubes that came off of here for the original bike. So I'm closing that up. I'm using the same gauge sheet metal as this thing is made out of. It's 14 gauge, so is this. And I'm just going through here and like so. And we'll go ahead and sort of figure out where I need to cut this. Yeah, I'm just roughly marking this stuff, then we'll cut it. All right, so here it is. I've cleaned up the edges and everything, so it'll be nice and clean metal for welding. But yeah, it should be fit in there about like that. It's not perfect. This part here is not flat all the way across, so I've got a decent gap right there, but I'll just fill that with weld material, filler, and then but yeah, that should work pretty good. All right, here it is, fully welded up, and it's still very hot, but that's basically the gist of it. That's welded on there now. There it is on the bike. Starting to look like a bike, dude. I've got a couple aluminum tabs like this that I've made up that go on either side of this guy, so I'm gonna go ahead and weld those on now. I only welded on one side because this guy's got that little channel in there. So we did not weld that side, just the one side. I'm gonna let these cool down with it clamped on the table like that. We let this cool earlier yesterday, and taking this off now, and here we go. We've got our little tabs on the side, and these guys now I need to drill these out. There's a whole step process for that. I've got to get this guy on here and get it situated exactly where I want it, and then drill our holes. But before we can even do that, we got to mark where the center is on these guys. I'm just marking on the outside here where that center is, so when I put the top over it, I'll still know where that center is. And we're also going to measure how tall this guy is. I'm going to pre-measure out where the center of that is in terms of the height. And then when I put my top on, I can put this back on here. Put this back on here where that center mark is, measure up from there, and then I know I can mark where my hole needs to be, and then I drill right there, and it should be right in the center of that tab. Alright, now I'm going to thread it. Alright, now with my reused bolt here, should throw this on here, make sure my top is lined up on there, and this should making sure my top is lined up. Alright, this should screw right in. Alright, there it is. Our top is secured. Just these two little bolts on either side, and that's it. And then with that little groove that we cut into the bottom plate helps secure everything down even more. And then there we go. It is a nice solid piece at this point. Now my next step is to cut off all these little extra wings and stuff and sort of smooth all this stuff down so that it looks one piece all the way through here. Alright, so now I've cut off all the edges and stuff. I've still got that groove in there. Now I need to refine it. So that involves putting this guy back on here. Alright, and here is the front end, basically. My other camera ran out of film. Ran out of storage, and so I missed a couple parts here in terms of finishing up this top, but we've got the edges down here refined around so it fits up nicely. The bottom and the top fit up nicely. And we got our sort of set screws on the sides. Each side here is a set screw that holds that top on. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I think it looks acceptable. It looks all right. I still plan on doing turn signals off of this guy so that the wires and everything all go inside this box. So I'm gonna have the turn signal just on the side here, side over there, and then we're gonna have the speedo or dash will be over here. So my next step is going to be to start building off of these guys, coming over to the side of the bike and start crafting this sort of fairing type thing on the side of the bike. So thanks for watching the video. I realize that this is not the prettiest solution ever, and other people could clearly do better jobs of this. And I think that I'd like to think that I could do better if I had like an English wheel, plenishing hammer, whatever sort of stuff, more sheet metal tools to sort of smooth this out and I get round curves. And if I had the skills to do that, if I had ever done that before. But I haven't, and I don't. And so I'm pleased that I've got something that is reasonably decent. With this bike, I mean, it was pretty trashed, and I'm not trying to shine it up and make it a show bike. I'm trying to make it a bike that I can ride around and be very functional. That is my goal, and that's where I'm trying to concentrate most of my energies and my money is into the functional aspect of this bike. But as I'm going along, if I can, I will try to make things pretty to the best of my abilities.